Hello! Today we're going to go ahead and tackle the appendicular skeleton as well as some synovial joints. I will say there is a lot going on with these labs, so I highly recommend pausing as we go along, taking the adequate notes, and making sure that you have everything from your objective lists in your lab manual checked off as we go. There is a labeling activity that goes along with the pictures and diagrams that I'll be showing in this PowerPoint. So feel free to pause now and print that off so that you're following along as we go. There won't be pictures of everything that we're going through, but a lot of them just to give you some labeling practice as we go along here. So starting off, bones of the appendicular skeleton. We just want to make sure that you are understanding that this appendicular skeleton consists of the pectoral girdle, the arms, the pelvic girdle, and the legs. All right. So starting off with your pectoral girdle, this includes your clavicle and your scapula. The clavicle you just need to be able to recognize as this S bone or S-shaped bone. It's going to have this S-looking shape to it. All right, you're going to see the acromial end and the sternal end. So this would be attached to your sternum in the middle of your chest, the medial side here of this clavicle. And this would be the acromial end. This will deal with the acromion aspect of the scapula. So we can see the scapula pictured here, and we can see the scapula in the front. So this is the back of the skeleton here. And we see the scapula and the clavicle. So this would be the acromial end of the clavicle. And then we can see the clavicle on the front side. This would be that sternal end of the clavicle. All right. So now we can talk about the scapula. So this is looking at it from the front side. You wouldn't actually be able to see this or feel anything on this besides maybe the coracoid process or the acromion. So feeling on the back of your shoulder, you can feel the spine here, and you can go out all the way to the acromion here. And this little ridge on the right, or on the very lateral side of your shoulder. And the point will be that coracoid process. All right. So you should be able to feel the spine, which is one recognizable aspect you should be able to identify of the scapula, as well as this glenoid cavity, which is kind of like a fossa. It's kind of like this little indent underneath the acromion. And then we also have, of course, the acromion. When it comes to the arm, there's a lot more going on here, so feel free again to pause and make sure that you're understanding what we're looking at and where we're looking at it. So we can kind of see this is the humerus. This is your where your bicep would be running along on the backside, your tricep. So this is, I guess, a posterior view actually, so your tricep would be running along right here. And this is the anterior view, so you'd be seeing the bicep run along right here. So we have the greater tubercle that's going to interact with the shoulder. This is going to be the head of the humerus. So the head is the larger aspect of it. And then you have this intertubercular groove. So this is going to be a large groove, the only groove that you need to know on the arm. So this is this very large groove. And then you have the lesser tubercle, which is going to be the smaller area. So the greater tubercle is going to be this larger one. The lesser one is obviously smaller. Then we have an olecranon fossa down here. It's going to interact with the head of the radius. All right. So make sure you're paying attention to posterior and anterior view, and looking at one that we could use from lab if we were in person. We could see here, this is that same view. This would be a posterior view of the humerus with the greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, and so on and so forth. We have also the next little section here of the arm, which would be the radius and the ulna. So two different aspects of each of those that you need to know. One is going to be the radial tuberosity of the radius. So this would be on the outside part of your arm. The inside bone of your forearm or wrist would be the ulna. The radial tuberosity is going to be this area that is going to interact with the ulna. And then the styloid process is going to be this bony ridge at the very end of the radius. We also have the styloid process of the ulna, so you got to be aware of which one you're looking at here. So this is our right forearm in the anterior view. So if you're palms were supinated, kind of like this skeleton's is, you'd be seeing the radius on the right side and the ulna on the inside, on the left side, more medial toward the body. And that little pointy part of your elbow, that would be that styloid process of the ulna. All right, and then the other point on the other side would be the styloid process of the radius. Okay, ulna on the inside, radius on the outside. Radius is kind of like radiating around, I guess. I don't know, however you need to do it in order to remember it. Radius is on the outside. And then we have that olecranon process. It's going to integrate with that olecranon fossa of the humerus. All right, so if we take this olecranon fossa, we stick it right onto this olecranon fossa. So the olecranon process integrates with that olecranon fossa of the humerus. So now we can kind of see our little the bones that would be used in lab. So we can kind of see the radius here, and then the ulna would have a little bit more of a C-shaped at the end here, but more than likely I would put them next to each other and ask you questions like them next to each other, so you can kind of use one as the other one as a basis for where we're looking, rather than just giving you one bone and saying like identify it. So we're not going to be that specific and picky in this class, so it's just how they would kind of interact next to each other. Next we have the hand bones. The hand bones are basically going to be, there's actually a lot that are relatively complicated, but you don't need to know them. You need to simply understand that there are these metacarpals, 1 through 5, all right, and then we have phalanges. So you need to understand what part, I guess, is going to be distal versus proximal. So you got to make sure that you're kind of paying attention to what you're looking at here. When it comes down to it, all I really need you to know in general when it comes to the hands is that we have these carpal bones, right? It's just this group. We have these metacarpals, and then we have the phalanges. Okay, so it goes carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. Meta, M for middle, they're like the middle carpals. And then you can think of the phalanges as being post phalanges or post carpals, like P for post, I don't know, further away than the metacarpals and the carpals. So don't memorize the numbers. Don't memorize head, shaft, base, lunate, triquetrum. Don't get into that. Look at your lab manual on page 22. All you need to know is goes carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. I know there's a lot of things pointing all over the place in these diagrams. Just pay attention to what is in your lab manual. That is what you are expected to know. Next, we have the pelvic girdle. You need to be able to distinguish a male and female pelvic girdle, which we'll get to on the next slide. But when it comes down to it, we have this sacrum, which is kind of like this fuse bone toward the end here, and the coccyx. So the coccyx is like your tailbone. Then you have this pubic symphysis, just stems right below that coccyx. The pubic symphysis you can think of as joining the pubic bones, right? So we have this pubic region here. So it's kind of joining those two together, this symphysis. And then we also have this sacroiliac joint. All right, so this is where the sacrum and the iliac region of your hip bone are going to meet. So sacroiliac joint. Okay. So when it comes to male versus female, with female, we can kind of see it's kind of smushed down a little bit, a lot smaller area in this little region, and you can see a very significant gap for the subpubic angle. It's a lot larger than for males. That makes sense because females give birth, so they need to be able to have a little bit larger angle for these hips to spread apart for the birth canal. So you can kind of notice this is a lot more lengthy sacrum in region for males, and females it's a little bit more squished. So here's what it would kind of look like in lab. You're seeing an anterior view here. You got the sacrum in the back, sacroiliac joint very clearly defined. I could put like an arrow pointing here and say, what joint is this? It's the only one joint that we need to know for the hips is the sacroiliac joint. You could ask about the pubic symphysis here. It's kind of like this cartilaginous joining. All right. Then we have the other parts of the, we have, well, I guess not other parts of the pelvic girdle is kind of the outside part of that pelvic region. So we have, this would be the lateral view of the right hip bone. All right, so we would have this, we have a lot of things blacked out here so that you can kind of see what you're expected to understand here. So when we have this ilium, we have the iliac crest. So this is the green area. This iliac crest is just this curvature here. And then we have the greater sciatic notch. All right, so this would be on the inside here. And then we have the ischium, which is this orange area. We have the ischial spine, which will be this pointy ridge. We have the ischial tuberosity, which will be on the bottom, tuberosity toward the bottom. And then we have the pubis. Okay, the two pubi will be joined together via the pubic symphysis from the last two slides ago. And then we have the acetabulum. This is going to be where the femur connects to the hip, the pelvic girdle. All right, so the acetabulum. So we can kind of see those represented here as pictures from the lab. So I could put a pointer here pointing into this area and ask you, what is this? And you would hopefully tell me the acetabulum, or I ask you, what is this? You'll tell me the ilium, or, you know, the iliac crest over here. Okay, the greater sciatic notch.